On May 12th, we have a full moon in the sign of Scorpio that could have an explosive quality, could make us want to lose our heads. I'll talk about all the aspects that relate to this full moon in the upcoming video. If you like and enjoy the content, please like and subscribe. It helps people find the content. So the full moon is in Scorpio. Scorpio is a water sign, so the full moon's going to have to do something with our deep emotions, right? Scorpio is, if you think about Cancer, it's sort of the shallow water, right, on the shore. If you think about Scorpio, it's the deep water of the ocean, going to the very bottom of the ocean. If you think about the third water sign, Pisces, that's like the water of the ocean itself, the oneness and the unity, right? So thinking about that deep water element, one of the ways you can understand Scorpio energy is people with Scorpio as a big part of their chart tend to enjoy going deeply into subject matters, studying things deeply. Even like I had a client today who had her Venus in Scorpio, and she was saying she loves to deep sea dive, right? That's where her joy comes from. I thought that was kind of interesting. And that's definitely the Scorpio energy. Scorpio also falls toward the autumn when darkness is taking over. And so it can have to do with grappling with questions of life and death and survival, hence the deep emotional quality. Scorpio also is represented by the scorpion, which is a figure that is able to sort of pierce its enemies. So there's this quality of scorpionic energy where they have a capacity to see through things, whether they're true or false. People with Scorpio energy can be very psychological, sort of peer into your souls almost, you could say. So you feel all the deep psychological energy of this sign. And it's got a fixed quality, right? Fixed signs tend to uh, stay with the matter. So that's where the persevering quality of Scorpio comes from. They tend to stay with an issue, an emotional issue, until it works itself out. You can understand Scorpio energy by comparing it to the other sign that's ruled by Mars, which is Aries. Aries is a fire sign that's quick, right? And it's ruled by Mars. So you think of the prize fighter who gets a knockout in the first round with Aries energy. But Scorpio is more like the prize fighter that goes 15 rounds, gets all bloodied up, stays with the fight, and perseveres and wins in the end. So that's the Mars energy of Scorpio. So taking it a little deeper, this full moon is in the third decan of Scorpio, and that is associated with the tarot card, the Seven of Cups. If you can see that, the figure in this card is looking at seven different cups that contain different things that he may desire, right? If you think about the seven deadly sins, pride, envy, lust. I can't remember the others, right? But that's the quality of the Seven of Cups card. It has to do with grappling with our desires. People with rising signs in this part of the zodiac, maybe people who confront and work through the spirit on a spiritual level, what it means to go too far, to enter spaces. They work with their desires around lust or greed or envy, but they do it from an internal space for the sake of gaining spiritual clarity, because the number seven is a spiritual number in numerology as well. If you think about, I'm just going to look at my notes really quick from the Kabbalah. The number seven is Netzach, which has to do with endurance and perseverance and creativity and emotional energy. And it also has to do with grounding divine energy into the physical realm. So hence this idea that people with Scorpio energy are kind of composting and working the deep emotional waters to gain a deeper emotional, or excuse me, spiritual understanding of themselves. So that's the energy of this full moon. And so what's interesting is we have this full moon, and opposite it, we have Uranus, which is a planet that has to do with liberation, breaking free, It was discovered during the French and American Revolution, right? So it has to do with the desire to liberate oneself, to be one's authentic self. And Uranus is right on top of the star, the fixed star Algol, which was called the demon star in ancient times. And so I'll tell you the myth that's related to Algol, and you're going to see where there's a potential with this full moon of losing one's head, okay? Because the demon star is similar to or related to the figure Medusa in ancient Greek mythology. And if you know the myth of Medusa, what happened is she was a woman who was raped by Poseidon in the temple of Athena, and Athena got pissed off because this was sacrilege, right? But instead of punishing Poseidon, Athena punished Medusa and turned Medusa into a hideous figure who, when other people looked upon her, her eyes turned them to stone. Ultimately, Medusa was slain by Perseus, and Perseus took her head and put it on Athena's shield so Athena could use it as a weapon, right, to kill other people with those Medusa eyes. And so there's a quality about this demon star, Algol slash Medusa, that its energy can be about all of those themes, trauma, feminine rage that comes out of injustice, right? And that demon star Algol is with Uranus, right? And it's conjunct the sun, right? Because when we have a full moon, that means the moon is opposite the sun. So we have the sun with Algol, or on Algol with Uranus opposite the moon down here in Scorpio. And so that's the tension of the energy of this full moon. And now you can see why I said, well, there's a potential with this full moon that we could lose our heads. We could get emotional, right? And particularly if you're somebody who has planets or points near the end of the fixed signs. The full moon takes place around 22 degrees of Scorpio. And Algol is right there at 26, along with Uranus of Taurus. So, so if you have planets near the end of Taurus or Leo or Scorpio or Aquarius, this full moon could affect you more deeply. At the same time, there's a potential for transformation with this full moon. That's what this third decan in Scorpio loves. It loves to take the deep emotional grappling with desire and use it as a way to spiritually transform oneself. Think of Jacob wrestling with God or the angel in the Bible. Think of Christ or Buddha and the different temptations that were placed before them. That's kind of the energy. So there's a potential to use this energy as a way to let go of things that no longer suit you, to wonder about what your desire is if you're holding on, because Scorpio can kind of tend to hold on to its desire. So you can wonder about whether this might present a situation where you're faced with, is it the moment when instead of holding on tightly, you need to let go? And the potential for bursting into some sort of anger or losing your head around a situation as well. At the same time, we have two things that are helping us out in this full moon. One is that the moon, while it's in its fall in general in Scorpio, it doesn't like Scorpio because the moon is about life and Scorpio is about death and letting go in some ways. But the moon does well in this last decan of Scorpio because there's something about being open. The moon is also about the cycles of life, and life includes death. And so there can be an emotional maturity with the moon in this decan where it realizes and is able to take in the reality of needing to compost or let those desires fall away. The other thing that's beneficial in this full moon is that we have Saturn in a trine to the moon, right? And Saturn is the god of restrictions and responsibility and seriousness. And when Saturn is in connection with the moon in somebody's birth chart, especially a connection that's a sextile or a trine, an easy flowing energy, there can be a capacity to restrain one's emotions when it's appropriate to do so. So it gives you, it's almost like having reins on the horse, where you're perhaps able to guide and work with your emotions in a productive way. So that does suggest, although there's a potential for losing one's head, that one may also be able to work this from a mature spiritual standpoint. I would double down on that because Saturn is at the very end of Pisces, the sign of compassion and oneness with the universe. Sometimes, while Saturn in Pisces can be a little bit skeptical and things like that around spirituality, there's also can be a potential for a mature spiritual outlook or the development of one's capacity to look at things from a spiritual perspective with Saturn there. So hold your horses if you can, and if you can't, forgive yourself, right? Because we're not, if something happens and you end up having a little blowout, maybe it was meant to be so, right? And we can always say we're sorry. So yeah, best of luck with this full moon, and drop a comment if you have questions about it, or if you have an experience with the full moon that feels like it's resonant with the video. I'd love to hear about that as well. And good luck. Have a great day.